Many of you ask me what's the difference between a real-life 296 GT3 and those in the sim. Well, recently Le Mans Ultimate just launched a massive update which included the Ferrari 296 GT3. I raced them in real life, I raced them in the sim. I've got the answers, let's jump in. The first thing we're going to address with the latest version of LMU is the cold tires on an LMGT3 car. I've experienced the cold tires. I raced this car in real life. I raced it this year. I raced the LMGT3 and I raced the regular GT3s. And I can tell you now, a cold tire versus a warm tire is night and day. There is no grip on the cold tire, especially at Spa where we are now. When we race at Spa in August, Eau Rouge in the first 2-3 laps on a cold tire is deadly. On the outlap, you're shifting down. Because if you don't, you're going to crash. I mean, surely some of you have seen some of the crashes in the WEC LMGT3 qualifying in Eau Rouge. It's because everyone's trying to push too early on a cold tire. And it's the same here in the game. There is no grip on the cold tire. Now, my feedback is that maybe the tires could take a bit quicker to come in, but the first lap, especially around long tracks like this one, which have long straights, you're looking at 1.5 to 2 laps before you can really start to push. If you're super aggressive, of course you can bring the tire in. Like the esports guys are going to be fine. But as an amateur driver or just a casual sim racer, it's going to take a bit longer to get the temperatures up. And I gotta be honest, this is one of the more realistic aspects of the game and something that they spent time on. So kudos to them on getting the cold tires right. Not every one of you was happy with this when they just launched and you felt like the cars have less grip than a road car when they leave the pits. It's true. We slide around a lot on the cold tire. The next thing I wanted to address is the difference between a GT3 and an LMGT3. As mentioned earlier, I've raced both. I raced the LMGT3 in the European Le Mans series and I raced the GT3 in the GT World Challenge. The LMGT3 cars have less downforce. They have a different aero package. And last but not least, the LMGT3 has quite a bit less power. In fact, we run very different electronic settings on the LMGT3. Particularly our traction control is much lower because of the less power that we have. And the reason they've done this is not to do with the hypercars. It's actually to do with LMP2s and LMP3s. In the European Le Mans series, we have the LMP3s. And if we had more grip and more power, we'd actually be able to overtake them. When they introduced the hypercars, they were slower than LMP1 cars, which meant they had to slow down P2s. As a result, they had to slow down the P3s. And finally, that meant the LMGT3s had to get slowed down as well. It's a bummer. We don't achieve the full potential of these cars that we used to be able to do in the past. But that's just the way it is. The GT3 cars that you see in GT World Challenge are faster, they have more power, they have more downforce. But nevertheless, they still feel, mostly similar to drive. A highlight of this update is the audio in the 296 GT3. This is the closest comparison I can make. I spent a lot of time in these cars. I've also spent a lot of time in the sim. And I gotta say, the 296 engine sounds that you hear in Le Mans Ultimate are almost as accurate as what we have in real life. It's just incredible. When I first drove a beta version of Le Mans Ultimate to see what it was like, and I heard the engine, I was like, what? That sounds like the car I just drove 2 days ago at the track. And that is because they got a lot of data from Ferrari about the 296. They got a lot of audio as well. Like, they didn't just get onboard videos, which is what a lot of devs use. They rely on the onboard cameras, but the onboard cameras don't have the best microphones. It turns out Le Mans Ultimate got more than just onboard camera audio. They were provided extra details from Ferrari, and they executed. This car sounds like, if you want to know what a 296 sounds like in real life, you've got to drive an LMU. That's because it's like within 2 or 3% of what the sound is from real life. Another detail that I wanted to point out in the game, which they've gotten right, is the sound under braking. You could hear the ABS, very much like ACC. ACC were the first people to pay real attention to this. When I was a test driver for ACC, it was the first thing I brought up with them. I was like, in an ABS car, you hear like this grinding sound. from a combination of the pads just pulsing on the brake disc, and also just brake pad on brake disc makes a big noise. And Lamar Ultimate and the devs there have managed to get that right. It's quite a realistic sound under braking, especially the final phase of trail braking in an ABS car. They've managed to nail that. So kudos on the sound of the braking, very realistic. But most of you want to know how this thing handles compared to real life. Yes, the audio and the cold tires are good, but ultimately, does this transport you into the world of what a real life GT3 driver feels when they're driving one of these cars in real life? And I gotta say, there's still a little bit of work that needs to be done there. They've made major strides compared to the first version of LMU, and definitely this is a night and day step compared to R Factor 2, which is what this physics engine is based on. Where is it missing? It's missing in the slow speed corners. There's a bit too much drifting that's going on, which I hope that they can tie up. You don't quite yet feel the weight of the car. It's still a bit too slidey. But at the slow speed, I think where they need to make the biggest improvements is actually in the force feedback. There's a little bit of a deadness going through the slow speeds like here. Yes, I can feel the curbs, but I can't quite feel what the chassis and the tires and the weight transfer of the car is doing. That is what is missing at the moment from this experience. In the medium and high speed corners, it's pretty good. That lightness still exists, but it's still nice and easy to control. If you compare that to real life, like there is more load in real life, but again, they've made massive steps compared to the previous version of Lamar Ultimate. The loading that I feel through the wheel now is just better. It's just more accurate to what we're seeing in real life. But on slow speed, they need to make improvements. One thing which I think they have got accurate though is the force feedback under braking. And some of you complain that there's a bit too much vibration under braking, but we experience vibration under braking in real life. It's just natural. Like a lot is going on through the ABS under heavy braking, and we're feeling that through the wheel here. I personally hope that they do not dial that back. As some have been saying in the discords, I hope that they keep it as is, because that's an element which I think translates well from real life to sim. Ultimately, we want to know if this is a realistic representation of the 296, and if it is, it will become my go-to sim when I'm preparing for real life. And I gotta say, so far it has been. Since I've been playing LMU, and obviously I got it earlier than most people because I was testing the game and I was testing race control and so on. It's been my go-to sim as I prepare for real life events. That's just the truth. This year I've been playing a lot of iRacing, and I've been using the Mazdas and the Fords, Formula Fords, which I've spoken about a lot. But when I started to drive the GT3s in LMU, I just found myself opening this game more often compared to the rest. And I think ultimately, as a real life driver in these cars, that's a really good indication of the steps that they've made. So if you want to try and pretend to be Coach Dave or Davide Rigon or Alessandro Pierguidi, give LMU a try. It's worth a shot. If anything, just for the audio. I'm Coach Dave, and that's my review of the 296 in Lamar Ultimate. Catch you on the next lap. Peace.